I started this, as Patty said, 28 years ago. And I have received an assignment to go down to Guatemala City's garbage dump and take pictures of the community that lived there and worked there. When I went, there was over about 3,000 people living in the dump, and 1,500 of them were children. People would scavenge for cardboard, paper, metal, food, anything in the dump. They would sell what they could and eat what they couldn't sell. This would give you an idea of what the dump looks like. It was actually, could we dim the lights a little bit maybe? Because there's a way to do that. This is, you can see how they use mattress springs as part of the fencing. Through the middle of the dump was black water. There were no toilets. There were 3 latrines actually for 3,000 people, and 3 water pumps where you could go and get your water. This is how people lived. They scavenged materials, whether it was plastic that you got or pieces of wood. It looked like playhouses that you kind of put together when you were a kid, you know. This is some of the first kids I worked with. This is Marta, is the little girl in the blue blouse, and her cousin, Juana, has the camera. They'd come down from the Quiche, from the highlands of Guatemala during the war years. Their uncle had been murdered by the military, and they thought that they were next, so they came down to work in the dump. There's myself with one of the families. I'll give you another idea of the location. Okay, so when I went down there with this camera, there were 2 nuns, social workers. One worked with Cesar Chavez, and the other one had owned a bathing suit boutique in Trinidad and Tobago. And they introduced me to the community. And the kids were crazy about looking through my camera and seeing what I was seeing. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting. And began to think, well, you know, maybe what I should do is let these kids do the photography. This is their environment. Why am I coming in and taking pictures when they can do it better than me? The kids were from 5 to 12 years old. So I thought, well, what I'll do is, well, I didn't think it right away. One of the nuns had a heart attack, and she said, well, could you take over my literacy class? And so I did. But you have to sort of realize why I was in the dump and why I stayed in the dump for 10 or 15 years before we moved on to gang areas and other poor areas of Guatemala and Honduras. I'd been in El Salvador as a tourist in 1977, 78. I'd gone down with my friend Marcy. We had no idea that it was the beginning of a civil war. We went to parties where people had been bayoneted during protest march, where they'd been strafed from helicopters during the same types of marches. And people said to us, oh, you know, there's always problems there, always problems in El Salvador. When I went back up to San Francisco, where I lived, I found out that in the pews of the Catholic Church, actually, they have lists of people who had disappeared from my area. I lived out by the beach in a place outside of La Libertad called La Perla, and La Perla had turned into a body dump. Everybody that I knew that were like teachers, union organizers, campesino organizers, it all disappeared. So I had a real drive to go back to find out what was going on. And so in Christmas of '82, I went down to work in the refugee camps. They needed somebody for Christmas break because the UNHCR was going on vacation for Christmas. And soldiers from El Salvador had crossed over into Honduras, where these camps were, and actually pulled people out of the camps and disappeared them. So they figured with a foreign presence, there'd be less of that. And while I was there, I was asked to take testimony for the Lawyers Committee in Washington, D.C. When Susan talked a little bit about it yesterday, about accreditation, you have to be, every 6 months you had to show that things that had improved in El Salvador in order for them to get U.S. military funding. And what would happen was they'd stop all the death squad assassinations in the city, and they would start to massacre in the countryside. And they cut off the countryside to the journalists. They couldn't pass there. So the people that were victims of the massacres would cross the river into Honduras for safety, to be in the refugee camps there. So I went down there and I took this testimony, and everybody was saying to me, so when are you coming back? And I was like, well, I hadn't really thought about that. And I said, this was December, it was Christmas. So I said, oh, maybe March. And so then I decided to call around and see if anybody would want the refugee pictures. And I got Time magazine, they said, yes, send them right away, the refugee camp pictures. And so I determined that I was going to go back in August. And I was going to spend 3 months covering what I could of the war in El Salvador and Nicaragua. And I was there maybe 2 or 3 days, and I just knew this was it. I was going to actually try to stick it out here. So that's what I did. I went down first for UPI. They gave me $25 a picture. This is one of the pictures of actually an inauguration of an airstrip, but I wanted it to look like what it was. That airstrip actually had drones that went into El Salvador to bomb. So it wasn't just an inauguration or ribbon cutting ceremony. This was this was like my first big assignment, and it was a U.S. helicopter had been shot down. That road is the Nicaragua-Honduras border, and the embassy didn't want any of us to go down there. They said the road was mined, you shouldn't go. I was so nervous. I made a will and put it in my box, you know, my little shoe box and stuff, and went down with a group of people. A lot of reporters were there. I went down with a young Honduran woman reporter. She was very good. When everybody had left, she stuck around, and she said, and the official line on this was that they were shot down in Honduras by Sandinistas. Nicaragua's on the other side. And what had actually happened, we found out from one of the soldiers there, was that a young soldier that she offered a cigarette and a bottle of Coke to, was that they had been in Nicaragua for several hours, and they were shot down in Nicaragua, but we managed to land in Honduras. So that was my first big story for UPI. I did a lot of things around the U.S. base that was based there. These are young. This is a young prostitute. She's 14. These are kids of the prostitutes, and you know, this whole thing about children and their futures really kind of got under my skin and became a seed of something else. This was. I'm just going to show you a couple of these, just to show you. Kind of give you an idea of why I left. And so this was, the Salvadoran guerrillas were always blowing up light posts. And so there had been another light post blown up, and I'd gotten there, and we were going to take a picture of it, and then everybody left. And these Salvadoran soldiers pulled this body out of a ditch and said, look what we've got. Later they put him on the hood of a car like he was a deer. And they said, we're the Brides of Death Squad. And it turned out they were with the Atocato Brigade. And they were a death squad. And I published this picture. And all hell broke loose because everybody was denying there was even death squads. There would be paros on the road, which were like traffic stoppages. And that's a body underneath the truck there. I was in a ditch. Part of my contract, then I went with Reuters, which is another news agency out of Britain. And part of my contract gave me combat pay. So they sent me to every place where there was a lot of trouble. And this was in Haiti, at the iron market. This again was a massacre in El Salvador. This was our guerrilla New Year's Eve party. This actually went around the world because, you know, nobody much works on New Year's Eve. And I had gotten into this, it was an abandoned town in a church where they were playing, they had an old boom box and batteries, and they were playing Creed's Clearwater Revival. And the girls had made skirts for themselves out of their combat pant uniforms by making them into A-lines, and there you have it. It was a romantic evening. While I was there, I saw this little kid, and he'd started out as a messenger when he was 8. His parents had both been killed in the war, and he was with the guerrillas, and they'd given him a gun. So, one of the things I had heard about was in this town, that was a ghost town, it was all controlled by kids. And these kids, this was the one that was the guard at the entryway. And so he would ask you what you were doing there, and he used his walkie-talkie to communicate up on the mountain with the adults to see if you could get in. And I had heard that, I'd heard actually from a reporter at NBC that these kids had told her that they had this really scary game that they played at night called Ghost, which we used to play when I was little, and it was like, you know, you played it with a flashlight and you ran around in the dark and, you know, you flashed it on somebody and they were out. But it just struck me. I mean, here these kids are running from the military, they've got high-powered rifles, and they're still getting a kick out of being scared playing Ghost. So I thought, I'm going to go to this town and I'm just going to see what's going on. And so, there's the kids, and you can see the AK-47s are as big as they are. This was a little girl, and she sort of has pegged her pants, made them skinnies, and pulled up the socks over them, and got her own distinctive style there. And she kept picking up flowers and holding the bouquet and sort of posing for me, you know. And it really brought back the whole universality of being 15 and posing and being sort of, you know, into it. While we were there, I went with my reporter friend Mary Jo, that's her VW, and the kids had found a newspaper, and they took out the movie section, and they were looking at the movies, and they were going like, oh my God, look, there's one with helicopters in it. There's one with helicopters in it. And so I said, have you guys ever been to the movies? And they said, no, but we'd go if you took us. And so Mary Jo looks at me and goes, don't even think about it. But I did think about it because, you know, I was busy taking pictures of kids in the city. I'd watch them get out of pop-top vans. Their reality was totally different. The guerrilla kids were always on the run. They never had a chance to go to school. And I thought, what's going to happen when the war ends? I mean, really, what's going to happen? How is there going to be a dialogue between these two groups of kids that had such dissimilar experiences of what it is to grow up? And this one was in Newsweek. This was, you know, a kid passing by an assassination. And this was frequent. This is a little kid. These two kids were picked up by the guerrillas. I mean, the army. They're at an army base. Their parents had been killed and they were adopted by the army. So I just thought, you know, actually there was one incident that was in 1989 during the elections, and we were having a meeting on who was going to cover what for the election. I was a photographer, I was the head of the photographers there, so I was saying, well, you know, you go do this one, and you have to get pictures of everybody voting and that sort of thing, all the candidates. So, two of the photographers that I'd hired took off, and they were stopped at the military checkpoint, and they showed their press ID to the military post. And the guy handed it back to him and sort of threw it on the ground. And they were on a motorcycle. And they said, oh, would you mind picking that up? And he said, pick it up. They went to the next one, showed their ID, and they pulled out, and they shot them both through the back. They killed Roberto, who was 27, and Luis, they shot through the arm, through the chest, and through the hand. Then took him to be interrogated for several hours in the military post, and then threw him in the trash can in the hospital. So I found all this out about 5 o'clock in the morning. They didn't want to tell me because they wanted me to cover the election. but I just about had it. I was very angry. The military said they wanted to get to the bottom of it, but you know, I knew that wasn't true. And I decided that, you know, I think I had just about enough of covering dead bodies, of taking pictures of dead bodies. And so I decided to go to Guatemala and do things that didn't have to do with war, which would be environmental photography, the indigenous movement, it was just getting started, the archaeology, and children's projects. And I thought, you know, I want to get involved in something to do with the community. But to tell you the truth, I would have never thought photography, because back then it was film and paper and chemicals and cameras, and it's expensive. And you know, how was I going to do that? It didn't even occur to me to do it. But when I saw these kids were so interested, I went back, got 3 cheap point-and-shoot type cameras and loaded it with black and white film, because I had a darkroom in my house in Guatemala City, and gave them the film. And these kids were amazing. Now, I did editing all over Latin America for Reuters, and yet these guys, these weren't just like good pictures for kids that kids had taken. These were like good pictures. I would have turned them into newspapers anywhere. I don't know if you can see that somebody's changing a baby in the background. This was taken by Marta when she was 5. Marta was the youngest. They were from 5 to 12. This one was a young boy named Benito brought this in, and he said, well, that's my aunt, and she's reaching for her glue to inhale. And that's her girlfriend down there. The other kids were like horrified. They're like, you can't take pictures of that. Trying to censor it right away. But of course I didn't want them to censor it. I said, well, you know, and I know you wouldn't be doing glue, but this is important. This is what's going on in your environment. Another kid, Adelso, used the camera as sort of as a weapon. He would say, he took this picture, he said, because his father was drunk, and he always throws everything around the house when he does it, so he wanted to show him what it was like, you know, how he left the place. And this is another one he did, and it was, he wanted to show his parents how it upset his little brother when they fought. This is Rember. He took a picture of his brother Alexander teaching his dad to read. And Marta did this one. When I asked her who this little girl was, she said, well, she's a princess waiting to be rescued by her prince, maybe somebody from Holland. Where she got Holland from, I have no idea. And so they took pictures of, you know, kids working in the dump. And I just love the composition in this. This was, you know, boys that were blue snippers. That was taken by Benito. And Benito was one of these kids that you couldn't get to talk, but his pictures were really phenomenal. I mean, they really spoke. And this was his self-portrait, you know, which to me was just perfect. Like up against a wall in the dark. This was another one he did with, you know, then they got into playing around. This was my first Christmas. And it's, you know, it's sick kid humor. Well, I thought it was funny at the time. But anyhow, and then this is Miriam, and it's yeah, she took this picture. I don't know where they found the dress, probably in a dump someplace, and she said, I'm in Spanish downtown, but I'm in town for one night only. And here's Miriam taking a picture of her mom in the dump, so you can sort of see the living conditions there. This woman was waiting to see, they were bringing, from the butcher, they were bringing all the leftovers and to the zoo, actually. And she was asking if they had anything that they could give her for her children to eat. And then Rosario, Marta's sister, on her way back from the latrine, they took the cameras everywhere. I mean, the cameras were like another accessory. They They got dressed in the morning and the camera went on. So we had pictures inside of cantinas, we had pictures of everywhere. You know, they were great social documentarians. And this was, she came back and the kids were pretending they were on the Xuxa Show, which was a children's program out of Brazil. So they were all dancing. And that became the cover of our book, which was Out of the Dump. And that was published, I think, in like '96 by, here in New York, by William Morrow. Yeah, so if you have questions, I'm more than happy to entertain them. Anyone?
I think we're all stunned. That's how I feel right now.
Oh.
It's a question. Right?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
How did the people in, like, where you visited, how did they respond to you?
Oh, they were great. I mean, they couldn't be kinder. It was, when we went to London, they'd seen us on TV, and people stopped us on the street. Of course, Marta was in traje, so it was pretty easy, you know, in the native dress to realize that we were, you know, who we were. But no, people were always really good, and then when we take them to, we've had shows in 14 countries. And people have come out of the woodworks to take them to, you know, all these different types of parks and museums and all sorts of things. And, you know, travel really broadens your horizons, probably even more than all the teaching that we're doing. You know, they go away for a week or two, tops of two, you know, but I think that's what really changes lives, seeing other people and how they live. So the question that's a corollary to that is everybody goes to me, well, how do they feel when they go back to the dump? And actually, by about day 7, they're getting homesick. They once asked Gladys if she would like to move to London, and she said, "Oh, well, you know, I'd have my own private house." And they said, "Well, I don't know." These were kids that live in the States, you know, they live in the tenements in London. And she said, "Well, would it have a swimming pool?" and they said, "Well, I don't think it would have a swimming pool." And she goes like, "I don't know, maybe for a year or so, but really I'm not interested." And she was living in the dump.
Do you get coverage? Has any news agencies covered this, documentaries, or in Guatemala? Is there any?
Yeah, we've been covered Japan, London, Tokyo, France, Mexico, New York Times, Washington Post. You got to remember, I was in the press, so I had the only feel-good story in the entire region. Reporters would come through and they go like, "Oh yeah, well we'll do something on Nancy." So I could pretty much choose whoever I wanted to, you know, who got the story, and yeah, so CNN, Bravo.
What about the Guatemalan government?
Oh no, we stay away from government.
You do?
Yeah. You know, governments change, governments are corrupt,
Right.
no government. But we've been in the local papers in Guatemala, and we've had shows in Guatemala and whatnot. Most of our promotion is done outside Guatemala. Yeah. Because our funding comes, you know, when I'm looking for funding, it's generally outside of Guatemala.
Can you describe your living circumstances when you were in the dump?
Oh yeah, I wasn't living in the dump.
Oh.
Yeah. No, I lived in an apartment. No, yeah.
Well, so now, what made you want to do this? Like, what was your drive behind all this?
All of what exactly? You mean covering wars, or do you mean starting
What made
projects?
you want to start doing this? Like, you have like a passion behind this?
Yeah, I was kind of hoping it'd be obvious. But yes, I do. I mean, it was just like, because of all the things that I covered, and how I viewed how children were being affected in all these areas, and how I thought it was really important to give a child a voice. And the camera does that. And it was such an easy tool for them, really, because these are point-and-shoot cameras. So in the beginning, I was not interested in teaching them f-stops or the rest of it. I would teach them not to cut off anybody's head and to look where the light was so that everything wasn't backlit. And to use a flash if it was, and I'd have them like pace off from, we used to go down to different places, with people working in the community. So we would do this thing, they would have to like walk up and then back up the number of steps that their flash would actually flash and then take the picture of somebody. And then we went back the next day and gave them the pictures the next class. So that they interacted with people in their community, so they sort of diminished the fear of asking somebody if they can take a picture. And then actually realizing what the distance was from the flash to the person. But one of our teachers did this great thing, and she did a whole series on different artists. That's what's up there now. And this was from a Vermeer print, The Milkmaid.
Wow.
And so the kid, did almost to the letter. He reinvented it with his mom. And here's another one that was from McGirr, the therapist. They really get into those things. Oh yeah, this was an assignment on gestures of love. And yeah, I love this one. Yeah, it's just sort of I like it when they play. I mean, it's like, yeah, here's the king of the house with his Aunt Jemima pancakes. And they do. That's from the design class. They do more of our designs. The teacher that's teaching design is like in her 3rd year at the university. Yeah.
Did you ever find that when you were working with the kids, obviously you have to contact with their parents
Yes.
as well because they're minors?
Yes.
Was there ever any pushback with that?
Pretty much not. I mean, I made sure I talked to the parents first. We had lots of parents meetings, and brought the parents in to see the children's work and all of that. When I went to take Marta and 4 other kids to Amsterdam, her mother got some pushback from the community saying that I was probably going to sell Marta in Amsterdam for her organs. Yeah. And I said, well, I'm not taking Marta, that's it, And Marta cried, and I guess cried for days until the mother came to me and said yes. And I'd already taken her older daughter to Alabama and back, and I'd taken Marta to London and back. But there was this visceral fear of sending them across the sea, which understandable, of course. But I think most of them, especially the moms, would always say to me things like, I've always wanted to travel. I'll never have a chance to travel. It'll be so great if my kid could actually travel. That'd be wonderful. So I think they got it, and like I said, I spent a lot of time talking with them. And, they knew me. They knew where I lived. Everything too. Yeah. No parties. Yeah.
So how do you handle, these kids are subjected to these conditions, and so how do you handle tragedies that come? They must come over 20 whatever years. Illnesses, deaths, gangs, how do you handle it?
Yeah, we've had 4 kids murdered. And we've had any number of other tragedies that you're talking about, yeah. And brothers assassinated and whatnot. We've been robbed, of all the computers one time, 26 Macs. So, you just, you think to yourself, well, if it's a funeral, how can I help? And you don't ask how you can help. You make 54 sandwiches or whatever it takes, and you just bring them there. And you're just there. You make sure you're there for everything. And we also, we've got a counselor too now, in the last 6 or 7 years. We have a woman that does counseling that's very good on all kinds of things, because there's, there's a lot of alcoholism and physical abuse. So you've got that sort of thing. But, and then when you're robbed and that, you just think sort of, okay, well, what do we do first? Well, we change the locks. We make sure we close down the school for a little bit, you know. We call in security people. It's not the end of the world. We'll send it out to everybody, you know, and just, you know, you just try to think of solutions, basically, and just keep going. I think that's it. This isn't doing its little minutes. Yes. Please.
You have one Fotokids in Guatemala City, one in Santiago?
Yeah, and we've had them in other places.
Oh.
We had them in California Central Valley, working with the agricultural kids, kids of farm workers. We did that for 5 years with the Cutler Rosa school system and did an after-school program with them. And then the one in Honduras we had before. And then we've got, yeah, the one in Guatemala City pulls in all the bad areas of the city, you know, like Mezquital and Villanueva and all these other places where there's problems.
What would it take to replicate it in other parts of Central?
A lot of dedication.
Yeah.
You know, because if I'd had my own children, I don't think I wouldn't have had the time to do this. So, and it took a lot of time to build it. We have, you know, we have replicated it in Honduras. They've taken it over, you know. There is a woman who's taken it over in the Central Valley. It is replicable. We were published so many different times that there were like a zillion spin-offs of Fotokids. Born into brothels, shooting back. There's a whole lot of them now. And Harvard actually did a thing where they invited all of us to, all the people that were doing photo projects around the world, and there were people from Mali and from the Amazon and all over. So yeah. Yes.
How do you support finance to run Fotokids, like the financial support?
Yeah. It's not easy. We've always been pretty blessed that way. But you know, I have individuals support kids, so they still do. I mean, people will contact us and say, I want to give a scholarship to a kid. So it's either $300 or $600 a year. They do it, you know, through PayPal, however they want to do it, or once a month, or send a check, or whatever they want to do. And then we need operating costs, and we need to pay teachers. You know, so that's another whole thing. So I look for grants, and you know, knock on wood, been pretty successful with them. Our budget's around $200,000 a year, which isn't much for a large project, but it's a lot when you have to raise it and you're the only one raising it. So, yeah, but you just keep looking and finding and figuring it out. No magic thing. It's not like, you know, somebody gave me, you know, patent and diagram or something. It hasn't happened yet, but if you know of anybody, let me know. Yeah.